Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third and last episode of the AoE4 Tournaments tier list video series. In this series, I've been ranking AoE4 tournaments based on how much I enjoyed casting and watching them, how revolutionary they were in their time, and some other factors as well that you can check out in the previous videos. We've got 5 more events remaining, but as a bit of a recap from the previous videos, the cutoff for these events is $10,000 prize pool. We are having 16 events in the history of AoE4 up until this point that crossed that prize pool barrier. We've ranked 11 of them already, and in this final video, we will take a look at the final 5. Starting off, we do have N4C coming up over here. $100,000 prize pool sponsored by Microsoft, the second largest LAN in the history of AoE4. At the time that it was held, it was the largest event in the entire AoE4 world. Now, despite the fact that this is N4C, which would kind of relate to AoE4 plus Nilly's Apartment Cup combined, this event was held at the Gamer Legion headquarters in Berlin, featured 8 players with 6 qualifying and 2 invited from previous events. Now, when you look at this event, this was by far the best event in Lenok's career. It actually created a big fan base for Lenok. He made it all the way to the grand finals, but then he got beaten by Beastie in a 5-1 fashion. This was the first tournament that Beastie has won, and, well, at least in AoE4. And this was really, in a way, Beastie's breakthrough tournament. Even before that, he had some great results, like quarterfinals finish. I think he may have had semifinal finishes as well. But this was his first win, and this was the event that set up Beastie as one of the premier players in AoE4. Now, the reason why N4C isn't perfect for me is because, to me, it missed a bit of a juice. I highlighted this in regards of Golden League in one of my previous videos. But when you are holding the largest event to that date, you want to make it super special. And I was kind of missing that, to be honest. It was great for what it was. It was an apartment setup, and that is something that the viewership in AoE4 that has a background in StarCraft 2 appreciated a lot. They compared the event a lot to Take TV's Home Story Cup in StarCraft, and I think that's a somewhat fair comparison. But as I said, this event was much larger than any of the events in AoE4 before. Prior to this event, the largest event that AoE4 had was $40,000 prize pool. This was a jump to $100,000, and when you do that, the expectations are sky high as well. I think the event didn't have any major issues, but when you increase the scale by this much, you're looking for something special, and I don't think that was really there. The other thing I was somewhat missing, obviously this is not something that you can realistically do with an apartment-style setup like that for a LAN, but this is only one of the 2 LAN events that we had, major LAN events those are, for AoE4, and we didn't have any crowd. Now don't forget, this was pretty much at the second part of COVID. It was kind of the down period of COVID by that time, at least at the period when this tournament was held. But still, when you look at NAC, for instance, a year later, which was held for AoE2, there was a watch party, 150 to 200 people were watching it live, all that stuff. I think that made the event a lot more appealing. That wasn't really there for N4C. I cannot really fault N4C for either of these because, as I said, circumstances were challenging with COVID around. This is the first time that Nilly had an AoE4 event as well. But when you hold the biggest event of the entire esports scene at the time, you want something super special, and I don't think that NAC or N4C had that. And it's actually very reminiscent to how I ranked Golden League. Same thing, Golden League came after N4C. It was the largest event at that time, and it was good for what it wanted to be. It's just the fact that it wasn't special in any way. Moving on, we have the Elite Classic over here. Now, this might be a recent memory bias from me, Elite Classic having only been finished like 3 weeks ago or so, but to me, Elite Classic became my favorite AoE4 tournament. This event, only $30,000, but we had 16 players who played a round robin. That means that every single player played everybody. 16 players, each playing 15 sets. That's a lot of games to cover. And I think this made the event super appealing, and it was very different from everything that we have seen in previous events. First of all, when everybody plays everybody, there's a clear power ranking that's established. It's not like, hey, I got a bad bracket, and I just got very unlucky in this event. Consistency is rewarded a lot in this format, and I think it showed in the final standings as well. The other thing I appreciated is that we had game after game after game on the broadcast. All of these round-robin sets were best of threes, so they were pretty quick. An hour long, maybe an hour and a half tops. And when you have a setup like that, you can just go from set to set. It's not like, you're watching the same two players battling it out for 2.5 hours and then you just switch to someone else, never to see the other players again. It's like, well, we have a Beastie Marine Lord set. Boom. We're done with that, but then comes a Vortex Luciferon. Each player that is a fan of or each person that's a fan of a specific player will get something to see on the broadcast day. Obviously, with so many sets available, there was a need for a second stream as well. EGC TV introduced the B stream for the event, and I think it was a great success. It allowed people to watch two series at the same time, which wasn't the case for any of the preceding events, actually, despite the fact that many of the preceding events had overlapping sets. Sometimes even semifinals overlapped in previous events, and only one of the two were broadcasted. But here, with the B stream, you had the option to watch two sets at the same time, and frankly, even with the two streams rolling non-stop, you had a bunch of sets from the group stage that were non-covered. Now, that can be a positive or that can be a negative. It can be a positive if you consider the fact that individual content creators still had some sets to cost that weren't covered by EGC TV, and it makes very good exclusive content to them. You jump on one of these sets, and you might be the only one that has that available on their YouTube channel. On the other side, if this is not done, then some of the sets are unfortunately lost, which is something that plagues a lot of these tournaments, but it is what it is. Still, I appreciate the format a lot. The maps, they were nothing special. The tournament wanted to be as standard as possible. Open land map style settings, that's all. The real intrigue and the real appeal of the tournament was brought forward by the fact that we had this round robin for the players. The only thing that could have gone a little differently, I think, is a bit of a more balanced setup for the group. Because one of the things that you could see if you look at the results is that the top 9 separated very much from the bottom 7 of the 16 players. So some of the sets weren't as close as you would anticipate them to be. If the skill gap between number 1 and number 16 is smaller, so if the players are much closer to each other, each of those sets would have been so much more appealing. And, it would have made the life of EGC folks even more challenging because it would have been so much more difficult to find the most appealing sets to broadcast. Having said that, to me, Elite Classic is an S tier. It's the smallest of the events that I've listed as an S tier. But to me, this format was the cleanest and most polished. It was really an event where everybody could find a lot of games from their favorite player to watch. And it really established a power setup where the strongest players were the ones that were the most consistent throughout the event. I've left all the team game events of AoE4 to last here. Starting off, we have the Winter Team Championship. This was a $40,000 event, and this was a mix of 3v3s and 2v2s held at the end of 2022. EGC event as well was broadcasted on EGC TV, and it did have GSL groups of 8 teams in total. Now, this is probably the best team game event to this date. Fun fact, when you look at the team game events, we have, as you see, 3 over here, plus you can technically add Castle Cup if you've seen my previous video on that. But technically, we only had 3 team game events throughout the history of AoE4. And Winter Team Championship is probably the best of them. It had custom maps, which I think make team games a lot more interesting. GSL groups are obviously always appreciated, but it had a couple of flaws. which mostly come from the fact that we had a limited amount of elite players available. When you have team games, it's a lot more difficult to get a lot of balanced matchups because the best players might just team with each other, and then you have like 4 or 5 teams that are extremely dominant, and then the remaining 4 or 5 teams may struggle to compete against them. We have seen some of that in this event. You know, when you have a team like Beastie, Marine Lord, and Demu, or Vortex, Lucifron, and Mista, these teams are going to dominate competition that doesn't have any of these top 16 players in them. And we have seen that a lot in the GSL group stage. Some of the sets were pretty one-sided because of this. Overall, the event was very fun, and once you've gotten to the playoffs, you have seen some very fun sets between these teams. And as I said, to this day, this is the best team game event that AoE4 had. But it wasn't revolutionary in any way. As I said, it was kind of tainted by the fact that a lot of the sets were one-sided simply because of the lack of available players or lack of available super high-level players. So for me, this is a solid B tier. Could maybe bump it up to like a very low A tier, but to me, this is the good, not great event. And with that, we move on to Africa Duos. Now, Africa Duos, again, it's an event that just happened recently. In fact, the finals are just 1 week away at the time I'm recording this video. By the time you see it, it's a lot longer ago, but when I'm recording this video, Africa Duos happened just a week ago. Now, Africa Duos, a $10,000 event sponsored by the streaming platform Africa TV with an exclusive broadcast on Africa. Now, this is the only true 2v2 event of AoE4 history. I totally forgot about this until I realized that I'm making this tier list and I started looking at the tournaments. There was the Rising Empires League as well, but that's below the $10,000 threshold. For major events, Africa Duos is the only 2v2 that's there. Now, Africa Duos used a draft system in which team captains were seeded, and then the lowest seeded team captain picked the teammate first, and then onwards we go. This created an extremely balanced lineup of teams because the quote-unquote weakest team captain could pick the strongest teammate, and as we went closer and closer to the strongest team captains, the Marine Lords, the Beasties, they had just some weaker quote-unquote players available. Again, I don't want to use the word weak or strong very frequently because that's very relative, especially because developers were also allowed to play in this game or in this tournament, given that it wasn't sponsored by Microsoft. So for some of these players, it was very difficult to judge how strong they are actually. But nevertheless, the concept of this draft system allowed the creation of very balanced teams. And because of that, this event had some very close sets. It was only a single elimination bracket of 16 teams. And EGCTV wanted to broadcast every single set. So that meant that there was no group stage, there was no larger bracket. Obviously, single elimination is not something I'm a huge fan of, but when you have a bracket like this with drafted teams, as we've discussed, I think it's a lot more legitimate than just having a 1v1 event with a large single elimination bracket. Some of the sets didn't end up being broadcast simply because days went very long. And part of the reason why this happened is because the teams were so balanced that almost every single set went to 5 games. We had a lot of very close sets, a lot of very long sets, so EGC actually had to cut out some of the sets from the broadcast, otherwise they wouldn't have finished by the time they needed to finish. Like, obviously you can't expect casters to sit there for 15 hours on a broadcast. It is what it is. So that's something that I take as a negative. It would have been nice if it would have been realistic to cover all of the games. Maybe best of threes throughout the early rounds at least could have been more realistic. But nevertheless, the tournament delivered some very entertaining games. If you've missed any of them, I definitely recommend you checking those out. They should still be pretty fresh out of the oven when you check this video, like a month or so old. But at the end of the day, the thing I loved about Africa is how close sets were. As a caster and as a viewer as well, that's what matters to me. Watching games that are fun, watching games that are intriguing. And with this draft system, it was very difficult to predict who's going to come out victorious. every single set that you've looked at, you had no idea what to expect. It wasn't like you go into this and you know that one team is massively favored over the other. And this uncertainty element and all the close sets made this tournament extremely appealing to me. But I cannot put it to S tier. I am putting it to a very, very high A tier, and I'm close to putting it into an S tier. The thing, as I said, that is somewhat problematic for me is the single elimination bracket, and that, a lot of teams got like one shot. If this event was held, let's say, for a little longer, if this event had a group stage in GSL, I would have put it into the S tier. It's still one of the most beloved events of mine in the entire history of AoE4. But to me, as I said, the lack of group stage just puts it into A tier. I've left the event with which I will be the most biased probably to last. And the reason behind this is because I wanted you to see the whole picture before I rank this. AoE4 Pro League, many of you may not remember, but there was one event that Lidakor himself organized in AoE4. $20,000, Microsoft sponsored. It was the first true team game event of AoE4 history. Dates back to early 2022. As I discussed with the Winter Championship of EGC TV, that was a difficult time for Age of Empires 4 esports. The game struggled a lot with animation cancels, with bugs, with glitches, started losing players, started losing viewers, and it was one of the most challenging times to host an event. As you see, the event is called Pro League, and I guess it's no secret that I considered the possibility of holding this in a league system where, you have teams and you just have that league system, relegations, promotions, all that stuff, something that you see in a lot of esports. When this event was negotiated upon, the numbers looked a lot better for AoE4, so that seemed a lot more realistic. Now, Pro League had its issues, partly because the game wasn't ready for team games at the time. There was no custom maps, it was still the early days of AoE4, so we just played with built-in maps. Crashes were an issue. They are still an issue, actually, but at that time, this was the first team game event, so the possibility or the probability of having a player crash was much higher than any of the previous events. Previous events were 1v1s. It was a lot easier to resolve crashes. It was a lot more problematic for team games. This was also at the time where the animation cancel meta was dominating the scene, actually, and it created a lot of controversy. A lot of people complained that animation canceling should be banned. A lot of players said that it's part of the game, so just use it. And that obviously didn't help the tournament either. The other thing I've noticed, looking back on the Wikipedia page of the event, is that a lot of the sets were extremely one-sided. Believe it or not, we had a top 8 team playoffs with every single set being a sweep but one. A single set was 3-1, rest of the sets were all 3-0s or 4-0s. That, to me, is probably the single most one-sided playoffs I've ever seen in my casting career. That's probably just very unlucky, and you cannot fault a tournament for having some one-sided sets, because that's a lot of times that depends on luck for the tournament organizers. But it definitely tells you something, probably in connection with how teams are built. Obviously, anyone could team with anyone. So the same way that we've discussed for Winter Team Championship, that's something that will create some very powerful teams, and those will be dominating the event. That was even more relevant for Pro League than it was for Winter Team Championship. In Winter Team Championship, you couldn't see as much dominance from these elite level teams as you've seen in Pro League. If Winter Team Championship is a B, I cannot put Pro League higher than a C. It breaks my heart to say this, and I'm still proud of the event because given the circumstances, we've done well. But when you look at the entire history of AoE4, that was one of the less relevant events. With that being said, we are done ranking the AoE4 tournaments. Again, I tried to give my best justification for each of these events, trying to look at how entertaining the sets were, how intriguing the settings were, how revolutionary the event was. And I think I've created a list that I'm proud of. I'm looking at this list and I'm saying, look, I think this is a pretty accurate representation of most of these events. I'm fairly certain that there will be people that will come in and argue with this, and I'm more than welcome to listening to your opinions. In fact, in the comments below, you're welcome to share your own tier list. I will put a link into the description of this video for this tier list template, so you can create your own tier list based on how you enjoyed either of these events. Hopefully, you've enjoyed this video. If you did, I greatly appreciate if you subscribe to the channel, if you drop a like to this video. These metrics help me a lot to get new opportunities, get new sponsorships, and, do a lot of cool stuff. So if you can do that for me, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed. If you did, please like and subscribe, and also share your feedback on this tier list. Share your own tier lists. See you in the next video.